In the mighty empire of Zircarin, King Varkal ruled with an iron fist. In this empire, strength was valued above all. However, King Varkal had a secret weakness: his daughter, Princess Xyra. Unlike the fierce warriors of his realm, Xyra was small and frail. The king believed that she was weak and a stain on his proud lineage. One day, the king made a decision that would change Xyra's life forever. He decided to give her away to a human warrior named Darius Holt. The king thought that by sending Xyra away, her weakness would be hidden forever, and he could show his people that he was still strong. Darius, a brave and respected warrior from Earth, was known for his honor and his skill in battle. He accepted the princess with a serious heart, not as a prize, but as someone who needed help to become strong. Xyra felt confused and hurt. She had grown up hearing that her weakness made her unworthy of respect. She had always known that she did not match the physical strength of her father's warriors. Now she was being sent to live with a human in a faraway land. Though scared, Xyra obeyed her father's order. She left her home with a heavy heart, carrying the shame and sorrow of her past. When she arrived on Earth, she met Darius. He welcomed her with kind words and gentle care. Darius did not see her as a weak princess. He saw a person who could learn and grow. He promised to teach her about the ways of the human warriors, who believed that true strength came from the heart and mind, not just the body. Darius told Xyra, "You are not defined by your size or your weakness. True strength is found in courage, determination, and learning from your failures." For the first time, Xyra felt a spark of hope. Darius began to teach her basic combat skills and simple strategies for battle. Xyra practiced every day, though she struggled at first. The training was hard, and the new ways of thinking were very different from what she had known in the Zircarin Empire. Yet each day, she worked a little harder, slowly beginning to understand that strength was more than just physical power. It was also about quick thinking, resilience, and the willingness to keep trying no matter how many times you fell. As the days passed, Xyra began to feel a change inside her. Her heart grew a little braver, and she started to believe that maybe, with hard work and guidance, she could become a warrior. Even though her father had once seen her as a disgrace, here she was, taking her first steps on a path to greatness. Darius watched her progress with quiet pride, knowing that even the weakest could become strong with the right support. This was the beginning of Xyra's journey, a journey of self-discovery, strength, and honor that would change her destiny forever. And so, with determination in her heart, Xyra stepped forward into her new future. On Earth, under the bright morning sun, Darius began training Princess Xyra in the ways of human warriors. Every day, in a simple training field, he taught her basic combat moves and careful tactics. Xyra listened closely as Darius explained that true strength was built through perseverance and practice, not just muscle power. Though she came from the strict traditions of Zircarin, she soon discovered that the human way valued both heart and mind. At first, Xyra struggled to learn these new techniques. Her body, unused to harsh drills, often felt weak and clumsy. But Darius, with a kind and patient tone, always encouraged her to keep trying. "Every mistake is a lesson," he would say. With those words echoing in her mind, she found the courage to rise after every fall. The princess practiced with wooden swords, learning to parry, thrust, and dodge. Slowly, she began to see that speed and quick thinking were as important as physical strength. As the weeks passed, the training sessions grew more challenging. Darius introduced basic strategies for team combat. He brought in other warriors to join their practice, showing Xyra how to work with others during a fight. Although she was shy and hesitant at first, the friendly smiles and support of her new teammates made her feel welcome. In these moments, she realized that every warrior, no matter their origin, had to start small. During quiet breaks, Darius shared stories of great human battles. He spoke of ordinary people who, with determination, had risen to become heroes. Xyra listened carefully, her eyes lighting up with hope as she imagined herself in those stories. She began to believe that she too could become a true warrior if she learned to trust her instincts and never gave up. The simple yet powerful words of those tales filled her with new determination. Training also taught Xyra about discipline and patience. Every morning, before the sun had fully risen, she would join Darius and his team for rigorous drills. Each exercise was repeated many times until it became as natural as breathing. With every passing day, her movements grew more precise, and her spirit grew stronger. She learned to control her fear and to use her weaknesses as stepping stones toward strength. By the end of the day, when the training ground was bathed in the soft glow of the sunset, Xyra took a moment to reflect on her progress. In the mirror of her thoughts, she saw that the fragile princess was slowly transforming into a warrior. Each lesson learned and each challenge met moved her further away from the image of weakness that had been forced upon her. Deep within, a new hope was born, the hope of becoming a great fighter who would one day prove that true strength comes from within. Xyra's first test in battle came on a cold morning. The training ground was busy with warriors practicing their skills. Today, a simulation was planned to test each trainee's strength and quick thinking. Xyra was nervous, but she knew that this test was a chance to prove herself. As the exercise began, Xyra moved slowly, unsure of her new techniques. Her opponent was one of the younger trainees who fought with bold energy. Xyra tried to follow the moves that Darius had taught her, but her hands shook and her steps faltered. In a quick moment, her opponent struck a blow that left her unbalanced. She fell to the ground in front of everyone. The sound of her fall echoed in the training field, and she could almost hear her father's harsh words from back home. "You will never be strong." The humiliation stung deeply. The other trainees whispered and glanced at her, and for a moment, Xyra felt small and defeated. Tears welled in her eyes as she lay on the cold earth, feeling that all her efforts were wasted. Yet as she sat there, a steady hand reached out to her. It was Darius. With gentle strength, he helped her stand up and whispered, "Failure is a lesson, not a defeat." Those words ignited a small spark inside her. Determination replaced the pain of humiliation. Xyra wiped away her tears and promised herself that she would not let this failure define her. Over the next few days, she trained harder than ever. Every morning, she rose early with the sun and practiced her moves on the training ground. Darius watched as she repeated each drill until the motions became smoother and her steps more sure. Xyra worked on her speed, agility, and balance. She learned to move quickly, to dodge attacks, and to counter with careful strikes. She also started to see that fighting was not just about power. It was about reading the opponent and using every bit of advantage, even if it meant fighting with less strength. This new way of thinking helped her start to understand the art of human combat. One day, during a sparring session with Darius himself, Xyra felt a surge of confidence. As Darius lightly tapped her shoulder to signal the end of the match, Xyra realized she had held her own. She had managed to block several of his moves and even scored a small victory by landing a light strike. Though it was just a practice match, that moment felt like a great achievement. In her heart, she knew that her hard work was beginning to pay off. Darius smiled at her, proud of the progress she had made. "You have grown much stronger today," he said in simple, kind words. Xyra's face brightened with hope. The humiliation of her earlier defeat was slowly replaced by the feeling of accomplishment and the determination to improve even more. This day marked a turning point for Xyra. With each step, she left behind the weakness and doubt that once defined her. The training ground became her place of growth, a place where every fall was a lesson and every rise was a victory. And so, with a steady heart and clear determination, Xyra continued her journey toward becoming a true warrior. In the great empire of Zurkarin, news of Princess Xyra's progress reached King Varkel's ears. Sitting on his cold, dark throne, the king listened to the messengers describe how his daughter was learning new fighting skills on Earth. The words stung him deeply. He had given her away because he believed she was weak and unworthy of his proud race. Now, hearing that she was becoming a fighter under human guidance filled him with anger and regret. King Varkle could not stand the idea that humans could teach his daughter to fight. In his eyes, the ways of the Zurkaren people were strong and unchanging, built on raw power and tradition. The thought that Zyra was learning to move like a human filled him with shame. Determined to set things right, he decided to send one of his best warriors to bring her back to the Empire. He chose General Raxel, a proud and fierce fighter known for his strength and honor. General Raxel accepted his mission without question. He boarded his sleek spaceship and left the dark corridors of the palace. The journey was long, and all the while Raxel planned his return. He imagined that Zyra would be scared and weak when she met him. His heart was filled with a desire to restore the honor of his people by proving that the princess had never changed from her original nature. When Raxel arrived on Earth, he saw a training ground busy with human soldiers practicing their moves. The sight of these warriors, using techniques unknown to the Zurkarans, made him uneasy. Soon, he found Zyra among them. His eyes widened in disbelief. Zyra moved with confidence and skill, her face determined and strong. She was no longer the fragile princess her father had once condemned. Raxel stepped forward and spoke in a deep, firm voice. "I am General Raxel from your father's court. You must come with me back to Zurkaran." Zyra met his gaze and replied calmly, "I have learned a great deal here. I will not return as a weak or frightened girl." The challenge in her tone surprised the general. Angered by her defiance, Raxel declared, "If you want to show your strength, then face me in a duel." A crowd of human warriors and trainees gathered around, curious to watch the contest. Under a clear sky, the duel began. Raxel attacked with powerful strikes, and Zyra dodged and countered using the techniques she had learned from her new friends and from Darius, her teacher. The battle was long and hard. Although Raxel was a mighty warrior, Zyra showed quick thinking and bravery. She managed to block many of his blows and even landed a few light strikes of her own. In the end, Zyra did not win the duel completely, but she did not lose as badly as anyone had expected. Furious, Raxel shouted, "You are a traitor to your own kind. I will return with the full might of the Zurkaran Empire." With those cold words, he left the training ground. Zyra stood quietly among the onlookers, catching her breath. Though she had not defeated the general, she had proven that her heart and skill were growing stronger every day. In a quiet morning, a sense of urgency filled the colony. Messengers arrived with alarming news. A vast fleet from the Zurkaran Empire was coming. The once peaceful settlement now faced the threat of war. Darius, the brave warrior who had taught Zyra the ways of human combat, quickly gathered his fellow fighters and prepared them for the coming battle. In a modest meeting hall, leaders and soldiers gathered around a simple wooden table. Darius spoke with calm determination. "Our enemy is near. They come from the stars with heavy weapons and strict rules. But we have our cleverness, spirit, and heart. We will not let them take our home." Zyra stood by his side, her eyes fixed on the people around her. She felt a mix of fear and resolve. Once seen as weak, she had now grown into a warrior, and she was ready to show that her strength was more than just learned techniques. It was in her very spirit. Soon, the sky darkened as the alien fleet arrived. Massive ships landed with a thunderous sound, and rows of Zurkaran soldiers stepped onto the ground. Their armor shone in the pale light, and they marched in strict formation. The heavy sound of their steps made the earth tremble. Zyra's heart pounded as memories of her father's harsh words flashed through her mind. Those words of contempt, once a source of pain, now fueled her determination. She would fight not only to protect her new home, but to prove that she was more than the weak princess her people once thought she was. As the first clash began, chaos broke out. Human warriors, using simple tactics and quick moves, dodged the heavy strikes of the Zurkaran soldiers. They fought in small groups, using narrow alleys and hidden paths to confuse their foes. Thyra fought with all her might. She moved with agility, using the techniques Darius had taught her. Even though her wooden sword was no match for the alien weapons in power, each strike she made was filled with determination and hope. The battle grew fierce. Explosions and shouts echoed through the colony, and the ground became a mix of courage and sacrifice. Thyra saw many of her comrades fall, but she refused to back down. Instead, she led a small group of fighters in a surprise attack from the side. Their clever plan caught the alien soldiers off guard, and for a short time, the tide of battle shifted in favor of the humans. By the time the sun set, the first day of war had taken its toll. Both sides suffered heavy losses, and the colony was scared by the conflict. Yet, amid the smoke and chaos, Thyra stood tall. Looking at the brave faces around her, she knew that this was only the beginning. The war had begun, and with each battle, she would become stronger. With a firm resolve, she promised herself and her people that she would fight for their future and honor her new life as a true warrior. The night after the battle was heavy with silence. Fires still burned in the distance, and the air smelled of smoke and dust. The human warriors gathered in a small shelter, tending to the wounded and planning their next move. Thyra sat quietly, wrapping a cloth around a deep cut on her arm. The pain was sharp, but she did not let it show. She had faced real combat, and though she had survived, she knew the war was far from over. Darius sat beside her, his face tired but determined. "You fought well today," he said, his voice steady. "But this is just the beginning. The Zerkaran Empire will not stop until they break us." Thyra nodded, her heart heavy. She knew her father. He would never accept that she had chosen a different path. To him, she was still a failure, an embarrassment, but she would prove him wrong. "We need a plan," she said, looking around at the warriors. "The Zerkaran army is strong, but they only know one way to fight. We must use strategy, speed, and intelligence to defeat them." Darius smiled slightly. "Now you're thinking like a human warrior." The next day, as the sun rose over the battlefield, Thyra and Darius gathered their fighters. The Zerkarans, with their large numbers and heavy armor, expected another head-on clash. But this time, the humans fought differently. They set traps, used the terrain to their advantage, and struck quickly before disappearing into cover. Thyra led a small team into the enemy camp under the cover of night. Moving silently, they took down guards and gathered information. She had learned patience from Darius, and now she used it well. They discovered that the Zerkaran army was waiting for reinforcements. If they could hold out long enough, they had a chance to weaken the enemy before more soldiers arrived. But Thyra knew that wasn't enough. She had to prove to the Zerkaran soldiers that strength was not just about power. It was about adaptability, about the willingness to grow. If she could make them see that, perhaps they would question their orders. On the battlefield, she fought with skill and precision, her movements sharper than ever. She did not rely on brute strength like the other Zerkarans. Instead, she dodged, countered, and used her opponent's momentum against them. Her own people watched in shock as she took down warriors they had once thought unbeatable. Even General Raxel, who had once called her a disgrace, watched her with hesitation. "This is not the way of our people," he growled as they clashed swords. Thyra blocked his strike and met his gaze. "Maybe it should be," she said firmly. The battle raged on, but Thyra felt something shift. The Zerkaran soldiers were not as confident as before. They had seen something today, something that made them question everything they had believed. And that was the first step toward victory. The battlefield was filled with the sounds of clashing weapons, battle cries, and the distant roar of explosions. The humans, despite being outnumbered, fought with strategy and skill. Thyra stood among them, her breath heavy, her sword steady. She had come far from the weak princess her father had cast away. Now she was a warrior. As the battle raged on, General Raxel charged toward Thyra. His massive blade cut through the air with deadly precision. "You are a disgrace to your bloodline," he shouted. "Fighting like a human is weakness." Zera dodged his strike, rolling to the side and countering with a quick, calculated slash. Raxel barely blocked in time. She saw the doubt in his eyes. "No," she said firmly. "Strength is not just power. Strength is knowing when to change, when to adapt. That is why the humans survive. That is why I am stronger than you ever believed." Their battle continued, fierce and relentless. Each of Raxel's attacks was filled with brute force, but Zera was faster, more precise. She used everything she had learned: quick footwork, strategy, and her own natural agility. The longer the fight went on, the more frustrated Raxel became. Then a horn sounded across the battlefield. The large ship descended from the sky, its shadow casting over the warriors. The fighting slowed as all eyes turned toward the massive vessel. Zera's heart pounded. She knew that ship. Her father had arrived. The ship landed with a deep rumble, and the doors opened. King Varkal stepped out, his golden armor gleaming under the sun. His presence alone was enough to silence the battlefield. The Zerkaran warriors immediately knelt before him, their loyalty unquestioned. The humans stood firm, ready for what was to come. The king's piercing gaze fell on Zera. His expression was unreadable, but his disappointment was clear. "Daughter," he said in a cold, commanding voice, "you have brought shame to our people. You have betrayed your own kind." Zera clenched her fists, but she stood tall. "I have not betrayed anyone," she replied. "I have learned. I have grown. And I have become stronger than you ever thought possible." King Varkal's expression darkened. "Strength? You call this strength? Siding with weak creatures, hiding behind tricks and tactics instead of facing battle with honor." His voice was filled with disgust. Zera took a deep breath. She had spent her whole life wanting her father's approval, but now she saw the truth. He was trapped in his old ways, unable to see beyond his pride. "Strength is not about tradition," she said. "Strength is about survival. Strength is about knowing when to evolve." The warriors on both sides watched in silence. Some of the Zerkaran soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. For the first time, they questioned their king's words. King Varkal's eyes burned with fury. "Then prove it," he growled. "Face me in a warrior's duel." Zera met his gaze, her heart steady. "I accept." A heavy silence fell over the battlefield. The war between humans and Zerkarans had paused, and now all eyes were on Zera and her father, King Varkal. The duel was a sacred tradition in Zerkaran culture, one that determined strength, honor, and leadership. If Zera won, she would prove herself once and for all. But if she lost, she would be forced to obey her father's will. Darius stepped forward, concern in his eyes. "You don't have to do this," he whispered. Zera shook her head. "Yes, I do. Not just for me, but for everyone who believes strength is more than just brute force." King Varkal removed his heavy cloak, revealing his battle-worn armor. He was a seasoned warrior, his muscles strong, his movements powerful. He drew his sword, a massive, deadly blade. Zera took a deep breath and tightened her grip on her own weapon. The duel began. Varkal struck first, swinging his blade with immense force. Zera dodged, just as Darius had taught her. She knew she couldn't match her father's strength, so she relied on speed and precision. She weaved through his attacks, landing small but strategic strikes. The watching Zerkaran soldiers murmured among themselves. They had expected Zera to fall within moments, but she held her ground. Varkal's face darkened with frustration. "You are fast, but speed is not strength," he roared. He lunged forward with a crushing blow. Zera barely avoided it, but the force of his attack sent her stumbling backward. Pain shot through her body, but she gritted her teeth and pushed herself back up. She refused to give in. "Strength is not just power," she shouted back. "It is knowing when to fight and when to think. It is learning, adapting, and overcoming fear." She rushed forward, using the momentum of her smaller frame to slide beneath her father's defenses. With quick precision, she struck his leg, forcing him down to one knee. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Varkul growled, furious, but before he could recover, Syra did something unexpected. She dropped her sword and stepped back. "This fight is over," she said. Her father glared at her. "You refuse to finish it." "No," Syra said firmly. "I refuse to fight just for the sake of destruction. I have already proven that I am strong." The Zerkaran warriors looked at one another, their loyalty to their king wavering. Many had believed that brute force was the only path to victory, but Syra had shown something new: wisdom, strategy, and restraint. Cain Varkul stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he let his sword fall to the ground. The battle was over. Syra had won, not through violence, but through true strength. The soldiers bowed their heads in respect. The war had ended, and a new future had begun. The battlefield was quiet. The war was over, and the weight of victory settled over Syra like a heavy cloak. She had won the duel, not by brute force, but by showing a new kind of strength: wisdom, patience, and restraint. The Zerkaran warriors, once loyal only to King Varkul, now looked at her with respect. Syra stood tall, breathing heavily as she met her father's gaze. The proud and unshaken king was now silent, staring at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. He had always believed that strength meant dominance, but today his daughter had defied that belief and still stood victorious. Darius stepped forward, watching the exchange carefully. The human warriors remained ready, unsure if the Zerkaran forces would accept the outcome or fight back. But instead of ordering another attack, King Varkul let out a deep breath and closed his eyes. "You have changed," he said, his voice lower than before. Syra nodded. "I have learned, and so must our people." For a long moment, the king said nothing. Then, to everyone's shock, he turned to his warriors and gave them a single command: "Stand down." The Zerkaran soldiers hesitated. They had come to destroy the human settlement, to take back their princess, and to win in the name of their empire. But now, their unshakable leader had surrendered. Slowly, one by one, they lowered their weapons. A wave of relief swept through the human side. Darius smiled slightly, proud of Syra's victory. She had done something no one thought possible: ended a war without bloodshed. King Varkul stepped closer, his gaze still heavy with pride and sorrow. "I thought you were weak," he admitted. "I thought sending you away was an act of mercy. But now, I see that I was the one who was blind." Syra felt a lump in her throat. She had spent her whole life trying to earn his respect. And now, after everything, she had it. But she knew this was just the beginning. "Our people need change," she said. "We must learn from others, not destroy them. The old ways must evolve, or we will always be at war." The Zerkaran warriors listened closely. They had always believed in power above all else. But today, they had witnessed something different. Their once disgraced princess had defeated a king, not with force, but with wisdom. King Varkul gave a slow nod. "Then lead them, my daughter." Gasps echoed among the Zerkarans. The king was stepping aside. Syra turned to the warriors, standing tall. "No more war," she declared. "No more needless destruction. From this day forward, we fight only when we must, and we learn from those who have survived where we have failed." The Zerkaran warriors bowed in respect. The humans watched in awe. The weak princess had become a leader. A new era had begun. The war was over. The battlefield, once filled with the sounds of clashing swords and roaring warriors, now lay silent. The sky was clear again, as if the universe itself recognized the end of an old era and the beginning of something new. Syra stood at the center of it all, surrounded by both humans and Zerkarans. She had fought not just for survival, but for change. And now, standing tall with her father's warriors bowing before her, She had finally proven that true strength was not just in power, but in wisdom and heart. King Varkal, the once unshaken ruler of the Zurkaran Empire, watched his daughter with pride and something he had never shown her before: respect. He had spent his life believing that weakness had no place in the universe, but today he had seen that adaptation, not force, was the key to survival. Darius stepped forward, arms crossed, a small smile on his face. "I'd say this turned out better than expected," he said, his tone light, but his eyes filled with admiration. "You've not only won a battle, Tyra, you've changed an empire." Tyra looked at him and nodded. "Not alone. I learned from you. From all of you," she said, looking at both the humans and Zurkarans alike. "I was cast out because I was different, but today I stand here because I embraced that difference." The Zurkaran soldiers listened carefully, some shifting uncomfortably. Change was not easy for them, but they could not deny what they had seen. "The old ways taught us that only the strongest survive," Taxira continued. "But strength is more than brute force. Strength is the ability to grow, to learn, to stand after every fall." She turned to her father. "You made me believe I was weak, but by sending me away, you unknowingly gave me the greatest gift, a chance to become more than I was born to be." King Varkal exhaled, then gave a small, rare nod. "And now you will lead," he said, his deep voice filled with certainty. "The old ways have ruled for too long. Perhaps it is time for something new." A stunned silence fell over the Zurkarans. Their king had stepped down. Their once disgraced princess was now their leader. The warriors bowed, one by one, accepting Xyra as their new ruler. Darius clapped her on the shoulder. "Looks like you've got a whole empire to run now. No pressure." Xyra let out a small laugh, something she had not done in a long time. No pressure at all. The humans and Zurkarans worked together to heal the wounded and repair the damage caused by war. For the first time in history, they were not enemies, but allies. As the sun set on the battlefield, Cyrus stood with her people, not as a weak princess, but as a warrior and a leader. A new era had begun.